listening to the Wandering Womb podcast with Jess and Jaimi. Strong women, strong drinks, strong views, and strong language.
I'm so glad that we don't have to listen to that.
She's very upbeat.
She is.
She is. You said she sounds like a CBeebies presenter.
I think, yeah.
I don't think we should be trashing our own jingle.
Well, yeah. So, for those of you who have listened to our podcast before, you'll notice we've now got a jingle.
Oh, I was just going to press the clapping noise, but it's like 12 seconds of clapping, and that's just not 12 seconds I'm willing to waste. You know what I mean? Imagine all our listeners being like, for fuck's sake, this is really long.
Maybe we could play it at the end if we have some time.
What, just all the effects? These are all the effects in our studio. All of them are shite.
Let's do a cheers.
It's going to be underwhelming. Do it again. Hang on, go back for it.
So,
cheers. Wank.
The cheers for this episode is I'm drinking a mug of tea because it's the morning, and Jess is drinking a bottle of juice because some of us are adults and some of us aren't.
I like a bottle of juice, of squash. I don't like tea or coffee or hot drinks. It's weird. I think if it's hot, it should be soup.
You don't even eat soup.
I do.
You dip bread in it as a condiment.
Yes, that's still soup. It's like a watery dip. Soup is a watery dip.
I agree. You know how I feel about soup. It's something that brought us together. Soup is a condiment.
Soup is a condiment.
Not a meal.
No, it's not. So true.
Oh, we should have soup for lunch.
I know. I fancy soup now. You're making me want to... Oh, I was just about to break into song. Doesn't matter.
Soup.
Yeah.
Tasty soup. Spicy carrot and coriander, chili chowder, miso.
Oh my god!
And if you know what that is from,
you get a gold star,
and you get to be my friend. And if you don't, then I'm sorry, but you'll never know. So we are going to do this podcast on Jess's new book, Sexy But Psycho. Some of you might already have pre-ordered it. Some of you might not have done. If you haven't, what are you doing? Pre-order it. And so I'll probably sort of just ask you like a few questions about it and we'll discuss it if that's okay.
It'll be an interview by my wife.
Yeah, that's going to be cool.
I've done so much press this week. I think it'll be nice to do it with you.
Yeah, and this is like sort of a lot more laid back and you'll probably go into a bit more detail and be a little bit
more candid.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to like worry that some journo is going to write a story about something I've said and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't mean that. It's not what I meant.
Yeah, and you're also allowed to swear in this. Okay,
that's
true. Should we just jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, Sexy But Psycho.
Yeah.
First question I'm going to ask is, what is the book about?
Sexy But Psycho, and then the subtitle of the book is how, because it kind of answers the question, how the patriarchy uses women's trauma against them. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the clues in the title, really. The book is about all of the ways that psychology, the mental health movement and psychiatry position and always have positioned women as unreliable, crazy, mentally ill, you know, the psycho ex, the crazy bitch, you know, that sort of thing. And that's not a coincidence. That's been going on for a long time. And that, you know, I really wanted to write this book because I wanted to show the clear line, like the progression through history of women always being positioned as crazy.
Yeah. You've had like a bit of pushback from people who say they don't like the title.
Yeah, I know.
Which is funny because I said, well, what happens? Don't judge a book by its cover.
No,
it's like rule number like 101 of books is, you know, that's what you get taught in like Aesop's fables when you're like 6. But you know, if that's your criticism, then
fine.
Then
fine by us.
You be you. So I guess, why did you choose to call it that? Like, why, and why do you think people are uncomfortable with that?
Okay, so first of all, as you keep reminding me, you came up with the title.
I did come up with the title. That is true.
I don't know how you want me to answer. If anybody has got a problem with the title, it's Jaimi at.
No.
No, we were driving in the car, weren't we, on the way back from the south of France?
Yes.
And
we
I'd
were.
had this whole like idea for Sexy But Psycho, and we were toying with titles because I knew exactly what I wanted to write, and I was explaining it to Jaimi, and we had a phone call with my publisher to sort of explain to him what my next book was going to be on, and you know, and then we were like messing around with titles, weren't we? And then you suggested Sexy But Psycho, and it was just perfect. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. But the title is, again, like, I know that some people don't like it, but the title's really clear. It's that women in society are either seen as objectified for the male gaze, something to fuck, to be sexy, to be desirable, or, you know, you're crazy, you're a liar, you're unreliable, you can be discredited, you're malicious, you're promiscuous, you are vengeful, you are out of control, you're unstable. So it's almost like you either be in sort of quote marks a good woman and, you know, do what men say, fuck them, give them what they want, marry them, have their babies or whatever, or you're a nutcase.
Yeah, or both.
Or you can be both, and that, like, and again, it, like in the book, it touches on the fact that there's now this fetishization of women who are mentally ill. It's like, oh, she's sexy because she's psycho.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to come on to this a little bit later, but for those of you who know about the Hot Crazy Matrix.
Oh, the Hot Crazy Matrix is just, it's one of those things, right, where you can see it being used as a joke. And you could maybe see a stand-up comedian laughing about how there's a matrix of women, that women are at all times have some element of being hot or not, and crazy or not, and that, like, if you imagine it on a like a graph, that if like the y-axis was hot and the x-axis was crazy, that like across that you're always, you know, either like how much crazy are you versus how much hot are you, and then, you know, like what does that man want to do? So if you are not very hot and you're super crazy, then he don't want to do anything with you. But if you are hot and you're also a psycho, then he'll definitely fuck you, but he won't marry you.
Yeah.
But like if you're medium hot and less psycho, then you're like girlfriend material. But like what's really interesting about the Hot Crazy Matrix, like that was done as a YouTube video, is like fun. It was like, I mean, obviously it's not fun because it's fucking misogynistic as shit, but like it was seen as fun, right, at the time. But what baffled me was when I found it in an academic journal.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was written by actual academics at a university in the UK. It was an absolute joke. I could not believe my eyes. It was in a fucking psychology journal where they were seriously using the Hot Crazy Matrix as a way of scoring women, and I was like, you've got to be fucking shitting me. Yeah,
which really sort of goes to show how needed this book is, right? Because if they're publishing serious, you know, articles, pieces of research on how crazy a woman is versus how hot she is, doesn't that just go to show that at all levels of society, even in top academic institutions, that women are having their trauma used against them in comparison to how fuckable they are.
Yeah, for sure. And like from that, I also found other top journal articles that were doing things like scoring women with borderline personality disorder on how hot they were, and like how much men wanted to have sex with them. So it was like scoring them on like men's sort of like, I don't know, like how attractive they are, I guess. So it's like an article where they were getting men to rate women with borderline personality disorder on how sexy they were, and then they actually concluded that men prefer women with like a psychiatric diagnosis because they're more sexy. And I was like, what in the fuck are these universities put, like, what are they paying for? And it made me think, you know how people are always like, oh, Dr. Jess Taylor, she doesn't put her stuff in top journals. well, here's why.
Yeah.
Like, it's full of shit.
Yeah. I think, like, one of the things that you just said is really interesting because it's sort of... So we know that psychiatric labelling is based on how society perceives normal at the time, right? So if a woman is not perceived as normal, you know, we know that women are supposed to be, like, sexually available but not too sexually available.
Yeah.
So if a woman doesn't fit within that and she is really sexually promiscuous and she really enjoys sex and enjoys doing loads of different things, there'll be the sort of assumption that if she does those things and if she wants to do things, you know, sexually that are, like, out there or you know, all sorts of different things, she'll be perceived as, like, psycho.
Yeah, as mentally ill, as unstable and wild.
But like that, yeah, like wild, and then that's perceived as sexy because it means that men get to do whatever they want to her.
Yeah, that's right.
Because she enjoys it and she lets them.
Yeah, and like, so like, I remember having a conversation with you when I was writing the book where you were saying that, you know, men find these psychiatric labels almost like sexy because also it positions that
Not
woman
like
as
other...
vulnerable and like, oh, she'll do anything I ask her to. She's easy to manipulate, or she's wild, so she'll do whatever sex acts I want her to do.
It's sort of like, oh, she's not a prude.
Yeah, exactly. And like how the fuck? This is how you know the whole thing is wrapped up in misogyny, because that shit is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's also why, like, the liberal lefty woke bros are, like, so pro it, because the shit that I know that they do to women in bed is disgusting.
Yeah, I know.
They totally get off on, like, degrading. They totally, you know, it's not equal. There's a reason why they are pro all of this stuff, and they're also pro sex work, pro porn of the exploitation of all these women,
fetish and pro BDSM.
It serves them sexually.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay.
All hail the beardy woke bros again.
Yeah. And obviously, like, I don't think this needs a disclaimer because of the people who listen, but obviously we're not talking about every man who is left-wing. Me and Jess are both left-wing. Very left-wing. But, you know, I think there's still definitely, like, a really strong pattern that you do, like, sort of see.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess one of the... how do I phrase this? One of the things that people often misconceive is that trauma and the things that women go through in life, you know, being a woman in the world is very traumatic, and you know, you're probably going to be subjected to a lot of different forms of oppression and abuse, but they believe that causes the way your brain works to work differently, and it causes these psychiatric conditions, and that it's like a biological thing, like change that occurs. What would you say to that?
I think that is a great example of where the biomedical model got sort of almost softened slightly to make it sound as if the social issues and external influences played a part in it. So what you've just described is technically the biopsychosocial model of mental health, is this belief that all mental illness resides in the brain, and it's an illness of the brain, but it's caused by external factors plus brain chemical changes plus psychological changes. And that was the second theory of mental health, because the original theory is just the pure medical model, which is that, you know, mental illness is brain chemistry imbalance, it's caused by disorders of the brain, whereas the biopsychosocial model tried to bring in those things like, oh, you know, I don't know, the reason that she has this brain chemistry imbalance, the reason her brain has changed is because of the trauma. I reject both of those explanations because we've never actually proven there's been any changes in the brain. Like, we can't test brain chemistry, we can't test for these so-called changes that we believe happen. Every brain is different. We know very little about the brain. Like, what always amazes me is people that don't actually study brain science, or i.e. neuroscience, they claim to know so much more than actual neuroscientists ever attempt to say. So, like, if you ever get into a conversation with neuroscientists or you're at a conference, they're actually very tentative. So they'll be like, we think maybe that this maybe what's happening, but we will need more studies. Whereas people outside of neuroscience are like, the brain is wired like this, and the brain does this, and there is a chemical that does this, and this is how it works, and it is proven. Whereas like neuroscience is like, yeah, no, we don't know that. Like, it's a theory. So I guess that it's easier for people to understand, to be like, oh, well, you know, this happened to them and then their brain chemistry changed and this is why they feel like this, rather than looking at the fact that, you know, women's responses to all those things that happen to them are just normal.
Yeah.
Like, what did you... Like, I guess one of the questions that I want to pose is, like, how do you want them to react to that level of trauma?
Yeah.
Like, why would that be an imbalance of some kind?
Yeah.
So, like, if you've got a woman that, I don't know, has been raped and trafficked and abused or was abused in childhood, and then she's now, I don't know, very withdrawn, very quiet, very tired, very anxious, scared of everything, has flashbacks. How is that a disorder? Well, what do you want it to be like?
Yeah.
Do you want it to be like, oh, yeah, I'm sound with it. Yeah, I enjoyed it all. It's great. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
So some people there would say, well, isn't there then a point where that individual is struggling too much to be able to function, where sort of where it wouldn't be within the realms of normal?
Yeah, but like, I kind of agree with that to an extent, but I still don't think that's an illness.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a disorder. So like, you can come across people that are extremely traumatized to the point where like they can't function. Their lives are destroyed by that level of trauma. But first of all, it's not forever, and second of all, that doesn't mean it's an illness inside the brain. It means that the things that are happening to them or have been done to them, or the things that are oppressing them, are so heavy that they are attempting to cope, and they're having all these trauma responses, and they're developing all these healthy and unhealthy coping mechanisms to try and just get through the day.
Yeah.
I still don't think that's an illness. So yes, I think it can. You know, people will be like, well, that is outside the realms of normal. Well, is it? But then the other question is it? Is it outside of the realms of normal?
Yeah.
I think it's actually well within the realms of normal if you consider how much people go through.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a common sort of misconception around believing that something is normal. So sort of the trauma-informed perspective is believing and acknowledging that these responses to these awful traumas that people go through are normal, and then the people who are medical model thinking, well, that means that you must think that they don't need any help then.
Yeah, I know. I do get that a lot. I think that people do. Sometimes I think people are being facetious, but sometimes it's that they don't. They think that that's what I'm saying. But what I'm actually saying is that, you know, there are multiple theories of mental health, but you're only ever fed one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I guess I'm saying in my book and in my work is there is an alternative understanding here you could be looking at. You know, maybe wildly, you're not mentally ill. Maybe you're not suffering from a personality disorder. Maybe you are not psychotic. Maybe you are normal, and maybe you are trying to cope with a load of really heavy shit, and your brain and your body is struggling to do that, and you need help and support and somebody to care about you. And so the trauma-informed model, which is what I work from, it's not about not helping people. It's not about going, go for a walk, or like, why don't you have a nice hot bath or something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you do not require sedatives and pills for the rest of your life because of what somebody else did to you. What you do need, though, is proper wraparound support whilst you process all that shit, whilst you figure out what it meant to you, what it's done to you, how it's changed your worldview, how it's changed the way you think about yourself and your body and your sex life, and all the way that trauma changes you is just like so multifaceted. So it takes a long time to process it.
I think one of the things to acknowledge here as well is people who would appear to have really prolonged trauma responses and coping mechanisms to it might even be that the outside world doesn't even think that anything's happened to them. But when you're an individual living in the world that we live in today, we're constantly worried about money, and I don't care who you are, like, everybody worries about money, because I think the current estimates are that at any one point, the vast majority of people living in the UK are 2 or 3 pay packets away from being street homeless. Yeah,
because people are literally living month to month.
Yeah, and then
even people on good wages. Because, like, for
absolutely.
example, say if you're, I don't know, a professional on 40 or 50 grand a year, you will live to your means often.
Yeah,
which means that if you got, I don't know, made redundant tomorrow, you're fucked in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Like, what, you know, it's interesting the way that works.
Yeah, and, like, you know, anything could happen to you. And people are always worried about that. People are always worrying about death. And you say this to me all the time because I really struggle. Like, I always think, oh, what if people I love are going to die? And what if I die? And what if the dogs die? And stuff like that. And you always say, everybody worries about death.
Everybody's scared of death.
And everyone just deals with it in different ways. A lot of people say that they're not worried about it, but actually everybody is. So that in itself is a constant trauma. And as humans, we're constantly trying to survive the same way as animals do. So if you're constantly worrying about how to survive, literally as in life and death, you're constantly worrying about, you know, people around you, and then you're living in a system of oppression like most of the world. And then if you're a woman, you've got the fact that you're probably at some point going to be raped. If you're you know, disabled, you probably, like, there's just so many different things that could impact you and will impact you psychologically every day that are inescapable, that I think would explain even some of the worst trauma responses, coping mechanisms, just how somebody lives their life, that some people aren't as in tune with that, whereas some people will really feed into it constantly.
Yeah, because since the book has been announced and, like, people have really started pushing me on stuff, one of the things that I get a lot is people going, well, you know, I've never had any big traumas in my life, and I've never been raped, and I've never had this, and I've never had that. And then the answer to that, and then they'll sort of go, well, and I've got a mental disorder and it's got nothing to do with it, it's genetic or whatever. It's not. It's
if
that,
it's
like,
genetic,
think
though,
about the way that you've just described the world.
Yeah.
Like that, you are very, very likely to struggle in the world.
Yeah,
so,
even if nothing's happened to you.
you don't need
you are
one
gonna
big trauma.
Yeah, you're going to be worried that something's going to happen to you, because the likelihood is that it is going to happen to you.
Yeah.
You will die. Your parents will die. The people you love will die. Your pets will die. Everybody dies. And that's a massive trauma.
And then on top of that, you've got, you know, you are very likely to have things like huge relationship breakdowns, because the majority of marriages end in divorce and, like,
God, this is depressing,
I know
isn't
it is. But the thing is, this is the conversation people aren't having. It reminds me of, do you know, what's that movie? Lego movie.
Everything is awesome.
Yeah, everything is awesome. And it's like,
workers being oppressed.
Yeah, and the point of that whole film and the opening of the Lego movie is that everybody is in the rat race. They're in a capitalist society, they're oppressed as fuck, they're knackered, they work themselves to death, and over the top of it is the song that's like, everything is awesome, and you're like, everybody's like, yeah, this is great, and my life's great, but, like, their life is this fucking constant treadmill of capitalism. So, like, and you're made to think that you are abnormal if you're not coping with that.
Yeah.
And if you think differently, or you think outside the box, or you're not happy with your life, or you're not happy with yourself, or you're not happy with where it's all going, and you become depressed and you become anxious, that you are the one with the problem.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, like, and that's the thing with Sexy but Psycho, is that, like, I needed a space to be able to say to women, you're not the fucking problem.
Yeah.
You are not the problem, but you've been tricked into thinking you're the problem.
Yeah.
And now you take pills every day.
Yeah. I think that's the next thing that we should probably come on to, is the individualization of this. So we live in this world where we could probably solve a lot of people's worries and anxieties by changing the structures that we live in and live by. But we don't.
Of course.
And instead, we medicate them, we say they're mentally ill.
Yeah.
And what does, from your perspective, what does medicating an individual who is struggling in life, what does that do?
Well, the first thing it does is it internalises the stigma.
Yeah.
So at some point, they've obviously gone somewhere and gone, I am struggling, I am not sleeping, or I am low all the time, I can't cope anymore, I want to die, or whatever.
Yeah.
So there was at some point some form of disclosure somewhere. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they went into detail and gone, and this is why, because they might not have even known why at the time. They might not be able to pinpoint it. But sometimes they do. You get people go to their doctors and say, I'm being bullied at work by my boss.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really struggling. I need to be signed off sick. I literally can't cope. It's making me ill to go there.
Yeah.
You have got there a straightforward cause and effect. And yet the answer is, here's some pills.
Yeah.
Like, that makes no sense. The problem, the fucking patient has just sat in front of you and identified the cause of the problem. They're being bullied at work. They need to be signed off sick so they can look for another job and so they can have a fucking rest, because it's harming them.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you individualise it and go, you know, you're not coping, so you need to take these pills because you have a brain chemistry imbalance. What you do is you've just placed that massive, you know, this bullying system at work and the fact that you can't whistle blow or that your boss is a fucking prick. You've just put that into them and gone, do you know what? You're not coping, and that's your problem.
Yeah.
And you need to solve it now. And this is how you're going to solve it.
Yeah.
Similarly, I had a really interesting conversation several years ago now with a clinical psychologist called Andy Fox. He was one of the supervisors on my PhD, and he works in clinical psychology, so he does a lot of this stuff. And we had some very critical conversations, like not arguments, because he was great to work with, but like we had some really great conversations where he was like, I have never thought of what I do like this. He was like, but he said to me, you know, we literally individualize the problem into the person, and then we tell them to have CBT.
Yeah.
And the thing about CBT is that the aim of CBT is to change the way you think about a bad thing so you stop reacting to it.
Yeah.
Which is not fair in traumatic or oppressive situations. Fair enough, you can use CBT on something that doesn't harm you anymore, where you might want to change the way you think about it. Like phobias are a good example of where CBT can work. Or like you might have, I don't know, anger, sort of residual anger that you want to process and like change the way you respond in a situation. You might say, oh, I've noticed that, you know, when I lose control of something, I get really angry and I don't want to do that no more. CBT can be good for like changing the way you think in a situation.
Yeah.
You can't fucking use CBT if you've got someone in front of you going, I'm on minimum wage and my boss is absolutely vile to me, and also I'm, you know, I've got debt collectors banging at the door and I'm being beaten up by my husband and my life is shit. And they're like, right, so how can we help you think differently about this situation so that you can, you know, be happier and more in control?
And that's
fuck
victim
off.
blaming,
That's
isn't it?
individualisation.
But that's victim blaming?
Yeah, of course it is.
Because it's not their fault, and they are being subjected to all of those things. So why is it on them to find the solution?
Yeah, exactly. And also the way that the thing is with CBT and the way that it's used is that it kind of like positions the person as, your thoughts are irrational about this, and therefore you need to change your cognition and your behavioural responses to the thing.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, I would argue, as a psychologist and just as a human, that if you're fucking super anxious and struggling about all those things that I just listed, why do you need to change? Why are your thoughts wrong?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
Isn't that a stressful situation to be in?
Wouldn't the solution be, well, why don't we see if we can get you a different job or a job that you'd enjoy more?
Yeah, or why, let's
and obviously
help you
get out of the relationship.
Yeah, consolidate your debt, get out of your abusive situation.
Yeah, there's that thing called the miracle question, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, I love using that word, but you have to use it really carefully and really sparingly.
Yeah.
But like, the miracle question comes from solution-focused therapies, which solution-focused therapy, again, you can really misuse that shit, but also it's really useful in people. But one of the things, you can do this yourself too, is like, the miracle question is a question that you ask yourself or someone else, and you say, if you woke up tomorrow and there'd been a miracle overnight and all your, you woke up and you felt totally better and you were healthy and happy and everything, what would have had to have changed overnight? What would the miracle have been that happened overnight while you slept? And often people sort of go quiet and go, well, I don't know, I wouldn't be living here, or I'd have a new job, or whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing is about the miracle question is that sometimes it helps people to get to the core of what it is that's actually bothering them without them having to do all the work, because you can sometimes really naturally, instinctively react to the miracle question. Like, people have asked it to me, asked me before years ago, and sort of gone, well, what would have to have changed in the morning for you to, like, I don't talk about this a lot, and I don't, but like around body image and stuff. But like, I remember being asked that, and it would be like that I would wake up and look completely different. And like, that doesn't mean that the solution is always real.
Yeah.
But it means that you can get to the bottom of what it is that is putting you in that level of distress.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are very distressed and they don't even know why.
Yeah.
Because they can't do the work around it yet because they're not ready.
Yeah.
But yeah, the book is, I mean, the whole thing, like Sexy But Psycho, and the arguments that I make, and the work that I'm doing, and the work my team are doing at Victim Focus, we really are offering an alternative.
Yeah.
We're offering an alternative way of understanding humans.
And what is the alternative way, and how can it be implemented?
Well, the alternative is using a trauma-informed approach, that humans are normal and natural, and you know, their responses are rational, they make sense. And I say to you, don't I, all the time, every human behaviour has a root cause and a purpose.
Yeah.
There are no irrational human behaviours. They are, you know, they all mean something. They might look out of context, or they might look extreme, or they might look irrational, but they're all linked to something.
Yeah.
They're not random.
Yeah.
Like, you know, everything means something. The human brain has evolved to do that. So, you know, if you're in a situation, I don't know, and you're thinking all of a sudden, oh my God, why am I panicking? Why is my heart rate gone up? Why am I having palpitations? It's a fucking reason. It's not because you're going mad. It's because something has triggered you in that environment, or you had a thought that even momentarily went through your head and triggered you, and your own thought triggered you, or a memory or a flashback or whatever it was, or a smell or a sound, and that is your brain's way of trying to protect you. So I think, you know, the real alternative is to stop seeing all these symptoms as an illness, a disorder, and go, actually, what does this mean for me? Why do I behave like this? Or why do I think like this? Or why am I feeling like this recently? Yeah. You know, there's a fucking reason. You're not ill.
Okay. Here is probably the question that you get asked the most. And I know you try to respond to it as much as you can, but it's sort of impossible to respond to it the amount of times you get it. What about schizophrenia?
I don't know why people are so obsessed with schizophrenia, as if it's some sort of like almost like a catch me out question.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand about why people think that the evidence base around schizophrenia is better than any other of the evidence base of the random shit that's in the DSM, is that there is, you know, schizophrenia in its current form is actually being removed from the DSM soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've decided now that it isn't actually a thing. It's a set of a load of other stuff they've made up.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I don't understand what people are going to do when people ask me that question. Well, what about schizophrenia? What fucking about schizophrenia? It's this. Why is that any different from borderline personality disorder? Why do people hold it in higher regard? Yeah. And the reason that they do, in my opinion, the reason they hold it in higher regard is because it's seen as the scary one. Yeah. The murderer and the serial killer and the crazy schizo that, do you know, like the same way that people talk about psychopaths, or a psychopath. The thing about schizophrenia is that if you understand the history of it, you wouldn't be so fucking sure that it was even a real thing. Like, so the origins of schizophrenia are actually racism, because the original term for schizophrenia, it wasn't called schizophrenia. It was I'm trying to think of the term. It's just gone straight out of my head.
Drapetomania.
There's drapetomania, and then there's oh God, there's the other one as well. I'm trying to think what it is. I'd have to dig it out of the book. It's in Latin. But like drapetomania. You
don't speak Latin.
Drapetomania and the other one. Sorry, it'll come to me in a minute. That's in Latin. It was made up by slave owners to control enslaved black people, and the original, you know, sort of concept of schizophrenia was that, because originally it was called black disorder, you could only be diagnosed with schizophrenia if you're black, because the belief was that only black people could be that mentally ill, and white people were actually protected from it by being white and being better, basically. And in the psychiatrist terms at the time, they used to believe white people were from good stock, so they believed that white genetics was stronger, and so they didn't ever get mentally ill. And they actually believed that black people were contagious, and that they would give black disorder, or a version of black disorder, to white people, and they would make them mentally ill if you spent too much time around them, right? So, you know, nobody gets taught the history of these disorders, and schizophrenia, that's where it comes from, that slave owners would get their slaves diagnosed with drapetomania, and then lo and behold, the treatment for drapetomania was 1,000 or 100 lashes, usually, like 100, like to be whipped 100 times.
Does that come from like exorcisms? Because I know that psychiatry comes from like religion, and like, oh, they've got the devil in them, so they used to like try and torture the body to get it out. Do you think that's come from that, or do you think it's just different?
I think it is probably related, but I mean, I'd have to have a look, because a lot of the
It could probably just like power and control.
It's power.
Isn't
Yeah, it's
it?
the same sort of thing, but it just shows up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it shows up in similar ways, but yeah. So like drapetomania originally was theorized as a mental disorder that made black people try to escape slavery. So the belief was, if any of your slaves tried to escape you as a white person, then they were mentally ill, and they believed that psychiatrists theorized that it was because black people were jealous of white people and they wanted to be white, which, like, honestly, the whole thing. Anyway, as the years went on, it got known as Black Disorder, and then if you look at the civil rights movements and the Black Panther movement, Black rights movements in the US, they started diagnosing Black Panther activists with having Black disorder, and at the time it was called protest disorder, because they were protesting for their fucking human rights. And around that time, it started being called schizophrenia. And so a lot of the Black Panther activists were diagnosed with schizophrenia and put in prison. And they were locked up in asylums and they were sedated. So that was one of the ways that they tried to shut down the Black rights movement, was to diagnose and to lock up as many of the activists as they could with protest disorder and schizophrenia. Still to this day, the majority of all mental health beds in the US are taken up by black people, and the majority of them, I think it's about 90% of those so-called mental health beds, are actually in prisons, where the majority of them have a diagnosis of schizophrenia. So the whole thing, I mean, is like, how do you then now in 2022, after I've just told you that like 90% of those beds are of black people in prison with schizophrenia, how are you going to stand there and be like, what about schizophrenia? Oh, because you clearly know so much about it.
Yeah, because if you believe that like these mental disorders like impact black people more, then that's racism. If you think that biologically black people are more like likely to have schizophrenia or certain mental disorders, like, as far as I'm aware, and from stuff that I've read and people who I've talked about, that's racism. It's like,
yeah, and it comes from that original belief that has been in psychiatry for a long time, that black people are inferior, mentally inferior, and that white people are mentally superior. And they believed, I mean, for God's sake, psychiatrists and psychologists in my own discipline used to write books and scientific papers claiming that black brains were smaller than white brains, and that they were less evolved versions of humans. That came from psychiatry and psychology. Like, I don't know how we're all right with that. Like, oh yeah. And like now we've got like people holding up schizophrenia as like the poster child of science.
And
like,
the DSM like still is just like a continuation, isn't it? Like, it's just like, I know that they bring out like new versions of it all the time, but they've not done any radical overhauls of it, have they?
There's not a fucking radical overhaul. There's been additions.
Yeah.
You know,
from
like,
the same book from...
They reckoned between DSM-4 and DSM-5, they discovered another 240 mental disorders in 12 years. Like, I'm sorry, but how are they going, like... How is that possible? So in 12 years, you've made 240 unique discoveries. Fuck off. No, you haven't. You've made them up.
Yeah. Okay. We've not got that much time left, so I think...
Are we going to do two?
So I think that we'll probably do a part 2 to this. So I guess there is one question that I want to ask, maybe on this one. We'll see if we can get to the second one. If not, we've got quite a few more to get through on the next episode. But do you think there is ever a place for psychiatric medication, and is that the view of all trauma-informed professionals?
That's a good question. My personal view is that there's no place for medication in psychiatry or mental health or psychology. I can't think of a reason why you would need to do it. Like, and I think about this a lot because people ask me this a lot, and I wouldn't say something if just for clout. Like, I cannot think of a single case in the last 12 years I've seen of women or men with so-called psychosis and so-called schizophrenia and hallucinations and bipolar and hearing voices where I would go, yeah, whack them on a load of sedatives. Yeah. I just can't think of a way or a reason why I would do that, and I can't think of a case where I would go, do you know what, the only thing we can do here is put them on antipsychotics. I can't think of a reason. Or not to mention the fact that all of those medications that are used in psychiatry generally come down to like one of 4 or 5 groups of medications. You've got sedatives, that literally just tranquilizers and sedatives. They just fucking knock you out for a bit and slow you right down.
Yeah.
Very dangerous for your body. Then you've got so-called antipsychotics that don't exist.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as an antipsychotic. They're anticonvulsants, so they're anti-seizure, anti-epileptic drugs,
Yeah.
which wildly, if you give them in too high doses, cause epilepsy. So, like, a lot of people out there are on antipsychotics, but they're not a true. They don't do anything to psychosis. They're an anticonvulsant. So again, they slow your body right down. All your reactions slow down.
Yeah.
You know, and all the rest of it. And then I can't think why you would give a tranquilizer. I can't think why you would give an anticonvulsant to someone who is struggling with something. And then you've got so-called anti-anxiety medication that doesn't exist. There's not a single medication out there that actually targets anxiety. There's only beta blockers, propranolol, stuff like that they claim treats anxiety by slowing your heart rate down and your blood pressure down. So I can't think of a reason why we would give that, because unless actually somebody had a blood pressure problem, like, because propranolol and so-called anti-anxiety medication is used in heart failure and heart disease to slow everything down so that your heart doesn't like continue to damage itself.
I got put on propranolol. It turned my nails blue.
Yeah, because it will have changed your circulation in your body, right? And then your last one is so-called antidepressants, which also don't exist. That's a marketing term. They're SSRIs or SNRIs or even like MAOIs, which we don't use that much anymore. And if you are on an MAOI, you're listening or you know someone who is, make sure that they fucking read about their drug, because you can't eat cheese and take an MAOI, for example, because it causes a chemical reaction that can kill you. There's all sorts of things.
It's the same with a lot of the antipsychotic.
Yeah, antipsychotics, for example. You can't take Benadryl. You can't take antihistamines.
And
you can't drink alcohol in them either.
I don't think that's the case for all of them, but
it's majority of them.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to answer your question, do I think medications do? No, I can't think of a reason why I would put somebody on those medications. I can't think of a reason why, if I was in a place where I would prescribe, why would I put them on that? I can't think of a reason why. So
what's the research on it? What does the research suggest is the effectiveness of these drugs?
Oh, well, to be honest with you, a lot of the research is done by the pharmaceutical companies that sell them, so a lot of it's sort of difficult to know how much of it's bollocks. But what we do know, though, is that placebo will perform the same, if not better, than these medications.
Yeah, because if someone feels like they're being helped and being listened to,
they tend to get better.
Yeah. And they're being taken seriously.
Yeah.
And someone is finally listening to them going, oh yeah, I totally... and they feel validated, and then every day they're able to take something that makes them feel more validated.
Yeah, exactly.
That definitely made me feel validated, and that, probably helps more, significantly more than being put on a
But that's
beta
the
blocker.
strength, isn't it, of the medical model, right?
Absolutely.
That people believe it so heavily that you got given a drug that did fuck all for your anxiety, but the validation of it actually helped.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that case, a placebo would work. If you would have been given a load of sugar pills and told it was propranolol, I mean, you wouldn't have had your nails go blue,
no,
because your circulation wouldn't have gone wrong, but you would have still felt validated, like somebody listened and took you seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially for women, when you've been raped or been through abuse and people don't believe you, that's traumatic. But then if you have a diagnosis where someone's like, yeah, that's true, and what you've been through has caused this, that feels really validating.
Real. Yeah.
Which, is a whole other kettle of fish. Okay, I think we'll leave it here for this episode, and then in the next one, there's quite a few things that I want to go through with you, including the euthanasia of young girls who have been traumatised and have been given psychiatric labels. Some other things that I want to go through is what you want people to take from the book, and the last thing that we'll probably go through in quite a lot of detail is why you believe that feminism isn't compatible with psychiatry. So
awesome. Okay, so let's go and do part 2 now.
Yeah.
If you are just listening to this one right now, we have 5 or 6 days to pre-order this book. If you're listening to us and you are a die-hard listener, I'm only going to say this on the podcast, I'm not going to put it on my social media, we are desperate to get this book into Sunday Times bestseller, because it means people can't ignore my arguments.
Yeah.
And if we can get it into Sunday Times bestseller next week, it has a really good chance of being picked up properly and taken seriously.
Pre-orders also count towards
they do.
the numbers for the bestseller, and we're really, really close to getting it into the Sunday Times. a couple of hundred copies will solidify
Yeah, for sure.
getting you into the Sunday Times, and then people can no longer ignore us. So please order the book. Amazon, Blackwell's, WH Smith,
Waterstones, Kobo, everything. Barnes and Noble, it's everywhere. Right, let's go and do part 2.
Woo!